Imagine this. The biggest security threat to your company isn't some external cyber attack, but something growing quietly, right inside its own walls.
Yeah, and maybe not involving dramatic espionage, but something much more, well, human, subtle.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. Insider threats. Sounds a bit cloak and dagger, maybe.
It can sound that way, but often it's closer to the everyday reality of many organizations than you might think. We're going deep to understand, what they are, how they actually arise, and why getting a handle on them is so critical.
Right. So our deep dive today is based on an article by Jörg Weidmann from April 7th, 2025. It's called Understanding Insider Threats When Security Risks Emerge Silently.
And what's really compelling about it, I think, is that it approaches security not just from a tech angle, but really puts the human perspective front and center.
It does. So whether you're, say, prepping for a meeting, trying to figure out the dynamics in your own workplace, or maybe you're just curious about hidden risks.
We aim to give you some valuable insights today, maybe a few aha moments without drowning you in jargon. The mission really is to unpack this often overlooked side of security, make it accessible.
Okay, let's get right to it then. The article talks about how insider threats often start with something pretty mundane sounding. Inner resignation. What's really behind that? Is it just being bored with your job?
What's interesting, inner resignation, as the article frames it, isn't necessarily about someone actively wanting to cause harm. It's more like an emotional detachment.
Detachment from...
From the job, yeah. From the team, the company's goals. The person's physically there, but mentally they've kind of checked out. The real danger isn't sabotage initially anyway, but more this silent erosion of vigilance.
Ah, okay. So the risk isn't the malicious act itself, but rather the carelessness that results from that disengagement.
Exactly. Someone who's inwardly distant often lacks the motivation to, take security rules seriously or follow processes carefully or even just pay attention.
Right. That indifference.
That indifference can unknowingly open up vulnerabilities, both for external attacks and just for internal mistakes that maybe would otherwise have been caught. It's this creeping process of alienation that weakens a company's resilience from the inside.
That paints a very different picture from the usual image of security threats, doesn't it? You think hackers in dark rooms.
Totally different. Here, we're often talking about regular people who find themselves in difficult situations.
And those situations can be heavily influenced by things outside of work, right? The article mentions personal circumstances like financial trouble.
Yes, it gets into that. And it talks about pretty serious external pressures.
What kind of examples does it give?
Well, things like gambling addiction, drug dependency, or just being buried under massive debt. Really tough situations.
And the point is that this kind of extreme pressure can push people towards, well, towards desperation.
Exactly. Towards seeing ways to get money that they would never normally consider, maybe selling company information or engaging in fraud, things they wouldn't dream of otherwise.
And what's crucial here, I think, is that these aren't necessarily inherently bad people.
Not at all. That's a key point. Often, these are employees who were once loyal, maybe even high-performing, but their circumstances changed dramatically. This shift from engaged employee to potential risk is really central to understanding insider threats.
Which just hammers home that core message from the article, doesn't it? Protecting against these kinds of threats means we can't just rely on tech. We absolutely have to understand the human factors involved.
Absolutely. If we ignore those, the article argues, companies leave themselves wide open. Technical safeguards alone often miss the mark when the real vulnerability lies in human behavior or circumstance.
Okay, but how do you deal with that without creating, an atmosphere of suspicion everywhere? The article mentions a culture of perception. What does that actually look like in practice if I'm leading a team or just working in a company?
A culture of perception, or maybe awareness, means leaders and colleagues become more attuned to changes in people.
Changes like?
Signs of withdrawal, maybe sudden mood swings, a noticeable drop in performance, things like that. It's not about playing detective or suspecting everyone.
Right, not about paranoia.
No, definitely not. It's more about fostering an environment where people actually look out for each other, where shifts that might signal underlying problems are noticed. Think of it like an early warning system, but based on human observation and care.
So more like a kind of collective mindfulness than surveillance.
That's a good way to put it. That's the crucial difference from a culture of mistrust. It's not about constant monitoring. It's about creating a space where people feel seen and heard. And this actually changes the role of security officers, too.
How so?
They shift from being just controllers to becoming, as the article puts it, relationship actors.
Relationship actors, that sounds surprisingly human for a security role. What's the idea there?
It means security folks proactively engage with employees, listen, and create channels where problems can be discussed openly, maybe even confidentially.
Okay, I see.
If employees feel they have someone they can actually turn to when they're struggling, maybe, just maybe, they're less likely to make desperate choices in difficult situations that could compromise security.
So prevention through open communication, that makes a lot of sense. It's not just good for security, but probably for the whole work environment too.
Exactly. It benefits the overall organizational health.
But what happens when, despite best efforts, something does go wrong? When an insider threat becomes real and causes damage?
Well, at that point, as the article points out, purely technical solutions are often too late. Cameras or firewalls usually can't undo the damage once it's done.
So then it becomes about what happened before.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's when you see the importance of the groundwork. Were warning signs taken seriously? Were there support systems or contact points for employees in distress? Was there proactive effort? Or was the risk basically ignored until it blew up into a crisis? The response to an incident is really a reflection of those prior efforts, or the lack thereof.
So how well you can react to the damage depends heavily on how much prevention work you did beforehand.
You got it. And the article connects this to the book Holistic Security Management and the idea of integrating psychosocial risks into the security strategy.
Psychosocial risks sounds a bit abstract. What are we talking about there?
Think about things like chronic stress from deadlines, the impact of poor leadership on morale, workplace bullying, lack of support, those kinds of factors.
To the impact of working conditions and social dynamics on security.
Essentially, yes. It's about recognizing how psychological and social factors within the workplace can influence security outcomes. Things like workload, organizational climate, management style, how personal problems are handled. If these risks are ignored, they can really fuel the development of insider threats.
And the article mentions a practical tool too, right? A checklist for dealing with insider threats. Sounds like it goes beyond just tech settings.
Oh, definitely. That checklist seems very practical. It prompts questions like, are access rights reviewed and adjusted regularly? Is there a clear, confidential way to report suspicious behavior? Are managers actually trained to notice and address changes in employee behavior?
Those are very concrete points. Anything else on that list that might be surprising?
Yeah, it also asks if support services are available for personal difficulties like debt counseling or addiction prevention resources. And crucially, it pushes for interdisciplinary case reviews,
Meaning?
meaning HR, security, and management actually sit down together to assess potential risks early on. So it's not just about who can access what data, it's a much broader, integrated set of measures.
That really shows it's a holistic approach being called for, not just ticking boxes on a technical list.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the article's fundamental point. Insider threats don't just pop up out of nowhere. They tend to develop gradually, often in an environment where needs aren't met or pressures aren't addressed.
So effective security isn't just about control.
Right. It requires actively shaping that environment, taking responsibility for employee well-being, and fostering an open communication culture. The real insight is security starts with people.
That's a really significant shift in perspective. Okay, so let's recap. We've learned that major security risks can grow silently from within, often stemming from human factors like disengagement or personal crises.
And that a purely technical approach just isn't enough.
Instead, what's needed is a proactive, people-centric strategy based on awareness, support, and open communication.
Spot on. It's about fostering a culture where people feel valued and supported, and where potential issues can be identified and addressed early.
Which leads me to a final thought for you, our listeners. Thinking about your own work environment right now, what subtle signs might hint at a growing internal security risk?
And maybe what concrete steps could you or your organization take to build that culture of awareness and support before those risks escalate?
Something to ponder, perhaps, looking beyond the firewalls and the access logs, and really considering the human element at the heart of security.